thrive in this environment as opposed to being a victim. So that was my mindset with all of this. And so hence my title, Thriving with a Chronic Illness, for the presentation this evening. So my background, I know some people are interested in backgrounds, especially when you're trying to understand diseases and what are some patterns that happen. So I thought it might be interesting for you to know that I am German. My family is 100% German. However, I was born in Latin America and grew up in Venezuela until I was 10 years old and moved to the States. I grew up on a healthy meat and potatoes diet, typical German diet, lots of meat, lots of potatoes. I think I probably consumed 3 gallons of milk a week. I was a cereal junkie growing up, especially when we moved to the United States. And oh my goodness, there's aisles and aisles of cereal, which you didn't have as much in Latin America. Generally speaking, my family was very healthy, so we had no chronic illnesses in the family. So maybe a heart attack, from a distant uncle or something like that. So relatively healthy. And I was always very healthy growing up, and so when I was diagnosed, it was somewhat of a big shock to my parents because no one in the family had anything, right? So it was a big shock, and I think my mom probably felt guilty. What did she do wrong in terms of feeding me and taking care of me when I was a kid? And I've always have worked in very high stress environments, and I don't think stress is our friend. So that's some of my background. So in April 28, 2004, I remember this so vividly. My husband and I were in Mexico, in Los Cabos, and we happened to go to Cabo Wabo. I don't know if anybody's been to that chain of restaurants, but they're famous for their tequila. And I had a little bit too much tequila that night, and it was like lunchtime. At dinner time, I started having problems with my vision, and I told my husband, I said, look, I think I overdid it at Cabo Wabo, and I got to turn in early tonight, even though there was a big party going on. It was a work event. I had won this great winner's circle trip, and I was extremely, drunk. And so I thought, I just had too much to drink. Next morning I wake up and I still have a problem with my vision. My vision in my right eye totally went away. I couldn't see anything, and called my eye doctor here in the United States, and he says, you need to get on the next flight and come back home. So right there, the panic just goes through your entire body, right? And so when I think about what was wrong with me in that early year of 2004, all of the symptoms were in my head. And that's always my joke, my illness is in my head. And it almost became my mantra that the symptoms are in my head, but also my frame of mind is in my head, and I control my frame of mind. So Rita talked about some similar symptoms that she and I share. We have the typical lesions in our brain that we find out when we get to have an MRI. I had the optic neuritis, which is all gone. The Solu-Medrol took care of that. I had horrible problems with dizziness, vertigo, nausea, imbalance, equilibrium issues. And it was embarrassing, similar to Rita's story about being afraid of being pulled over for a DUI. I would literally be at work and walk into walls. So I'm just walking down the hallway, and all of a sudden I'm walking into the wall, and I was really concerned about the fact that people would think I was drunk at work, right? So very, very concerning, to the point where I was very uncomfortable even driving to work. So I had a lot of sick days. I took some leaves of absence, and it was just really, really difficult on me during those years, those early years, 2004, 5, and 6. I had extreme inability to concentrate, cognitive issues. When I would write my grocery list, I'd misspell items. So milk would be spelled M-L-I-K, garlic may have been spelled as gralic. Simple typos and things that I typically did not have an issue with. So it was a very scary time. And the fatigue, Rita, you talked about fatigue. The fatigue is just awful. I'm sure there's many of you in the room that deal with that. And it's just awful. We're used to leading vibrant lives, and then you get a chronic illness, and you're just exhausted all the time. You can't even do anything. So very, very stressful. And I also had the temperature intolerance, similar to what Rita described, but not to her extreme level. And it was a very, very difficult time, those 3 years. At that time, they didn't diagnose me with MS yet. It took about 3 years before I was diagnosed in June of 2007, and many doctor visits. And, to get the diagnosis, relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, what the heck is that, right? My doctor at the time, I don't think was a very kind man or a very caring man, so that was very difficult for me as well. Working with someone that I was just a number, just a chart, as opposed to a human being who's afraid and fearful about what this future means for me in my early 30s. So it was very difficult, and my whole life became around the illness. And if I look at the years of 2007 to 2010, countless doctor's appointments, physical therapy, all the Brant Daroff exercises, everything to get you back balanced, and all of those things were just horrible. MRIs and tests and medications. So Rita explained that she was on Avonex. The drugs for multiple sclerosis at the time were the ABC drugs, so I was on the C drug, Copaxone. So Copaxone is a daily injection, and I'll have to put my things down, but anybody here had to take Copaxone? Okay, so do you know the Copaxone Macarena dance? Exactly, so dun 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 dun. Okay, so that's the Copaxone that we got to do every day, right? For 3 years, every day you take an injection, and what makes it so awful, or for me personally, it was a daily reminder that there was something wrong with me, and my quality of life deteriorated significantly. I too believe that these medications are poisonous. When I started taking the Copaxone, in the beginning everything was fine, but then 6 months into it, I started having necrosis in all of my injection sites, where your skin starts kind of going away, and I would have these huge red swelling areas, and it was so hot to the touch for like a couple of days. And I literally, every time I would inject myself, I felt like there was poison going into my body. And anything that creates a big red welt and heat, and I just didn't feel in my mind that was the right solution for me. But I was faithful. Oh my gosh, okay, for 3 years, every night, and then you go through the routine. I would cry myself to sleep every night. And then the last year of taking the medication, I would go into anaphylactic shock every night. So I would give myself the injection. I kid you not, my husband would stand nearby with an EpiPen, the phone in hand to call 911, and we would see me going through this mild version of anaphylactic shock. My nails would turn blue, I couldn't breathe, and it was just awful. Every night I cried myself to sleep, and I was just over it. I was just so sick and tired of it. I said, there's no way that something that causes these horrible, horrible reactions can be good for my body. And so I since then have switched doctors, and my new doctor, Dr. Matthew Baker, with Collier Neurologic Specialist in Naples, is just a godsend. He was open and willing to try something different with me as opposed to continuing the medication. And so we made an agreement. I went on a medication sabbatical for 6 months. And he asked me to continue to do my MRIs and check in with him on every 3 months. And we continued to do MRIs, and guess what? No more lesions. So I kept saying, can we go for another 6 months? Okay, so we kept going and going and going. And so I went off the medication around April of 2010, and I haven't been on any medication since then. But here's the secret. So I think the secret is all around what we put into our bodies. And in that time period, I actually went through a paradigm shift about, it's no longer about managing my illness, but what can I do to thrive in this environment, right? right? I'm in my late 30s by now. I don't want to live like this the rest of my life. I don't want to go to sleep crying every night. I don't want my husband panicking whether he has to call 911 and I may keel over and die. I didn't want that for me. There had to be another option. And plus, I'm a German stubborn lady, so I figured there had to be another option.
Gotta love her.
My problem.
And here are the things that helped me go through that paradigm shift. So back in that time frame, 2007, we had the MS Home. Today it's the MS Center in Naples, and I joined a support group. And what was so fascinating about the support group was that no one was on medication except for those of us that were newly diagnosed. So what was fascinating is that there was even one woman who had thrived on MS for 40 years and never been on medication. So I started asking questions. Well, what is it that you're doing? Why are we all taking medication and dealing with these effects? And those of you that have been here 20, 30, 40 years, what are you doing differently, right? And it came down to what they're eating. And back then, I didn't even know what vegan was. You know, I knew what vegetarian was. I didn't understand the concept of whole foods, plant-based diet. But just started asking questions. And then the women were so wonderful. They bring samples of the vegan cheese and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I can do this. This doesn't taste that bad. I can get used to that. And so it was almost like a challenge to myself. What can I do to improve my situation, right? If there's other people in this support group that have been living with MS for this many years, but they're not taking the medication, what can I learn from that? And I kind of got the mantra in my mind that our bodies heal ourselves. Like if I cut myself, it will heal. If I go through surgery and the doctor cuts me to fix something, that will heal. So why can't my MS heal, or why can't my symptoms get better? So I just kind of held on to that in my little mind. That was my mantra. And so I started thinking, what can I control? I can't control a lot of things, but there are some things I can control. I can control what goes into my mouth every day, right? I have control over that. And then the other thing I really needed in this equation was my doctor to be supportive of me. And that was very important. And Dr. Baker's support, I think, was the most important thing I could have done, along with my support group. Part of that paradigm shift was also about what are the things I can focus on and what are the things I should avoid in my life. And the first thing that I focused on was all about learning and reading, right? So talk to people who have had MS for a number of decades. What are they doing differently? And reading books. So in this support group, they recommended the Multiple Sclerosis Diet book. Dr. Roy Swank is the doctor. He did a 30-year study about how low-fat foods can help improve symptoms in MS patients. And I read the book, and it was really interesting because he still talked about chicken and fish, avoiding red meat. And then I wondered, okay, if that improves things, I wonder what happens if you don't eat the meat and just focus on the vegetables, the grains, and the fruit, and the nuts, and those kinds of things. And I read so many wonderful books, and thank you to all the people in my support group that recommended different books like the China Study, Hallelujah Acres Diet, the Rave Diet, and there's so many books that come at the same topic but from a different perspective. And I was fascinated by it. And what I take is I always take a few nuggets, and what are one or two things that I can do differently to improve my situation as opposed to just being overwhelmed by everything. And I started thinking about the healthy, whole foods, plant-based diet. And I'm about 95 to 98% on a whole foods, plant-based diet. So I'm not 100% vegan. I allow for exceptions. So if you're at the holidays, love my turkey on Thanksgiving, love my Christmas cookies at Christmas, and in work situations, sometimes you're at a business dinner and you can't just, order what you want, or you go over to somebody's house and they're so excited that they made you a vegan dish and it's a lasagna full of cheese, you don't want to give their cards and you're like, oh, thank you, that's so sweet of you. And so, I make exceptions. And so, for me, I'm about 95 to 98% on a whole foods plant-based diet. And yes, I will have a scoop of ice cream every once in a while, or something nice from the old way of eating. But and so the things to focus on is also just having faith, right? So I believe in God, whatever your faith system is, but I think you really need to focus around all the positive things in life, having an attitude of gratitude and helping others. And I think when you're dealing with a chronic illness, there's a lot of things you should avoid. You should avoid stress. You should avoid negative people, negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative situations. And the big thing, why we're all here, is avoiding the meat, the dairy, the processed foods. And what's fantastic now, I just had an MRI in December, on December 1st, and I met with my doctor a few days after that. And he said if he were to look at my MRI, if I were a new patient today, he would not diagnose me with multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
That's huge. And, I really believe it's all about attitude and creating an environment where your body can heal. And it's a lot of factors. You need to have that support group around you. You need to have that attitude. You need to focus on the food. And, it's just so wonderful. So many people here know each other. And walking into this room, I don't know that many people, but I just love the camaraderie here. And this is what really helps us overcome these life challenges that are thrown our way. And I think the nicest thing out of all of this is just talking to people, and friends of mine or colleagues of mine or family members of mine say, I switched to eating a whole foods diet, and I'm feeling a lot better. And that just makes me feel really good, because I don't feel we should live with a poor quality of life. We're here, and we have the opportunity to thrive and have vibrant lives. And sometimes you don't even realize the people that you touch, or books. I'm really big on giving people books, so I'm always giving the Cancer Survivor's Guide from the Food for Life course. The Rave Diet book, I give that to a bunch of people too, so I'm always finding books for people. But it's all about giving back, helping each other through these journeys that are thrown our way in life, right? And so I'm just very fortunate and humbled to be here in front of you to talk about my story. And I think, thinking back, I can live my life again, right? It's all about doing the most that you can with your life, and it is possible to thrive despite a chronic illness, right? It's the choices we make in life, the attitude we have and embrace. And I feel better. I have a lot more energy, no longer fatigued. Every once in a while I have a few little things going on, but nothing big. People always comment how vibrant I look, and they always can't believe that I'm 46 years old. They're like, really? Okay, yeah, sure. And family members and friends are all, those that have changed, it's just amazing. I'll have a colleague, I'll send them a book and we'll talk to them about the topic, and then 6 months later I'll get a little thank you note saying, oh, I'm off my medication for such and such. So it really feels good. You have many positive side effects. At one point, I was on Synthroid for thyroid issues. I'm off that. So just really focusing on being healthy, and talk about my last MRI confirmation. So that's my story. And